I'm Allison Hayes, 28 today, and I nearly dropped my cheap wine when my estranged billionaire grandfather Howard appeared at my door. 12 years of silence shattered by his unexpected visit to my cramped apartment, a place that costs half my teacher's salary. He looked oddly out of place, his custom suit probably worth 3 months' rent. After awkward pleasantries, he smiled thinly and asked, "Is the apartment comfortable?" I was speechless. How dare he suddenly care? Little did I know this question would unravel the web of lies surrounding my parents' deaths and expose a family conspiracy I never imagined. Before I share what happened next, where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had family secrets turn your world upside down. Trust me, you'll want to hear how I discovered the truth behind my grandfather's question. Growing up, my relationship with Grandpa Howard had been special. Despite running Hayes Enterprises, a multi-billion-dollar technology corporation, he always made time for me. Every Sunday was our day. He'd pick me up in whichever luxury car he was testing that week, and we'd spend hours at museums, parks, or just talking over ice cream. He taught me chess, told me stories about his humble beginnings, and always said I reminded him of himself, stubborn and too smart for your own good. My father Nathan was his oldest son and the company's CFO, groomed to eventually take over the business. All that changed when I was 12. The police arrived at our door late one rainy night in October. My parents' car had veered off a mountain road, killing them instantly. I remember standing in the funeral home, numb with shock and grief, when Grandpa Howard approached. Instead of the warm hug I desperately needed, he barely looked at me. His words were cold, formal. "You'll be staying with your Uncle Robert and Aunt Veronica now." Then he walked away. Uncle Robert was Howard's younger son, always living in my father's shadow according to family gossip. He and his wife Veronica had 2 children, my cousins Drew and Caitlin, who were 14 and 10 at the time. Their sprawling mansion had more than enough space for me, but from day one, it was clear I wasn't welcome. "Your father was the disgrace of the Hayes family," Uncle Robert would say whenever I mentioned my dad. "Consider yourself lucky we took you in." Aunt Veronica was worse, treating me like an unwanted servant while lavishing attention on her own children. My inheritance from my parents mysteriously went into a trust I never saw a penny from. The worst part was Grandpa Howard's complete disappearance from my life. No calls, no visits. At family gatherings, which became increasingly rare, he'd acknowledge me with a nod, nothing more. When I asked to speak with him privately at Drew's 16th birthday party, he claimed he had an urgent call and left. I watched through the window as he sat in his car for 10 minutes before driving away. Meanwhile, Drew and Caitlin received everything they wanted: luxury cars on their 16th birthdays, expensive private schools, extravagant vacations. When I graduated high school with honors and asked Uncle Robert about college funds, he laughed. "Your father left nothing for you. If you want college, figure it out yourself." So I did. I worked 3 jobs, waitressing, tutoring, and weekend retail, while maintaining a full scholarship at State University. I lived on ramen and coffee, slept 4 hours a night, and graduated summa cum laude with a teaching degree. The day after graduation, I moved out of Robert and Veronica's house and cut all ties with the Hayes family. No one tried to stop me. For 6 years, I built my life independently. I secured a position teaching English at an underfunded public school, found my tiny apartment, and made a small circle of loyal friends who knew nothing about my wealthy family. The only reminder of my past was the birthday card that arrived each year containing exactly $100, no signature, no note, just the money. I suspected it came from Grandpa Howard, but I used it to buy myself dinner and tried not to think about it. This year was different. Along with the usual $100, there was a note in elegant handwriting: "I would like to see you. Expect me on your birthday at 6 p.m. Howard Hayes." I nearly threw it away. After 16 years of rejection, what could he possibly want? But curiosity won out. I cleaned my apartment, bought a bottle of wine I couldn't afford, and waited, telling myself I was ready for whatever new disappointment he might bring. At exactly 6 p.m., the buzzer rang. My hands trembled as I pressed the intercom. Hello? Allison, it's Howard Hayes, came the formal reply, as if I might have forgotten my grandfather's name. I buzzed him in and waited by my open door, listening to the slow, heavy footsteps climbing the stairs to my third-floor walk-up. When he appeared, I barely recognized him. The commanding presence I remembered had diminished. His tall frame seemed smaller somehow, his shoulders slightly stooped, though his clothing, a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car, was impeccable as always. "Allison," he said, extending his hand as if we were business associates. I shook it awkwardly, noting how his once firm grip had weakened. "Please come in," I said, suddenly conscious of my apartment's limitations. The living room doubled as my dining room, with a second-hand couch, a small table with mismatched chairs, and bookshelves made from cinder blocks and planks. My pride and joy was my collection of books, many rescued from library sales and thrift shops. Howard entered, his eyes scanning everything. He looked like a man conducting an inspection, noting the water stain in the corner of the ceiling, the rattling air conditioner, the patch on my couch cushion. "Would you like something to drink?" I offered. "I have wine, water, or coffee." "Water would be fine," he replied, still standing, seemingly unsure where to sit. As I went to the kitchen, really just an alcove with appliances, I heard him moving around. When I returned, he was examining the framed photo of my parents I kept on my bookshelf. "You look like her," he said quietly, referring to my mother. "But you have Nathan's eyes." I handed him the water. "Please, sit." I gestured to the couch while taking the less comfortable chair for myself. An awkward silence followed as he sipped his water and I waited for him to explain his presence. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Your apartment, is it comfortable?" The question ignited 16 years of suppressed anger. "Is that really what you came here to ask? After all this time?" He looked down at his hands. "No, of course not." "Then why are you here?" "Why now, after 16 years of pretending I don't exist?" Howard placed his glass carefully on a coaster. "I've made terrible mistakes, Allison. Unforgivable ones." "That's an understatement." "I deserve your anger," he said, surprising me. "But I'm running out of time to make things right." Something in his tone made me pause. "What does that mean?" "I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors give me 3 months, maybe 4. The news hit me unexpectedly hard. Despite everything, some childish part of me had never stopped hoping for reconciliation. Now it seemed we were on a deadline. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "Don't be. It's given me clarity." He leaned forward. "There are things about your father you need to know, Allison. Things I should have told you years ago." Before he could continue, his phone rang. He checked it and his expression hardened. "I have to take this." He stepped into the hallway, closing my door behind him. Through the door, I heard tense, hushed conversation. When he returned minutes later, his composed facade had cracked, revealing obvious distress. "I have to go," he said abruptly. "An urgent situation requires my attention." "But you just got here," I protested, surprised by my own disappointment. "You haven't told me anything." He reached into his pocket and produced a key attached to a small Hayes Enterprises keychain. "This is to my penthouse at the Westerly. Come tomorrow at noon. We'll talk then." He pressed it into my hand. "Please come, Allison. It's important." Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me holding the key to a world I had forced myself to forget, wondering if I should use it or throw it away. I barely slept that night, turning the key over and over in my hands. By morning, curiosity had won out over caution. I called in sick to work, put on my nicest outfit, a simple black dress I saved for parent-teacher conferences, and took the subway to the wealthy downtown district where the Westerly stood. The Westerly was the most exclusive residential building in the city, a gleaming tower of glass and steel. I felt out of place the moment I stepped into the marble lobby, acutely aware of my scuffed shoes and drugstore makeup. The concierge eyed me suspiciously until I showed him the key. Mr. Hayes's granddaughter, I explained. His demeanor transformed instantly. Of course, Miss Hayes. The private elevator is this way. The elevator required both a key and fingerprint scan, which surprisingly accepted my print. It opened directly into a breathtaking penthouse occupying the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, and priceless art-adorned walls that were probably worth more than everything I owned. Mr. Hayes? I called out. No answer. A woman in her 40s emerged from a side room. You must be Allison. I'm Jessica, your grandfather's personal assistant. Her expression was warm but professional. Howard had to attend an emergency board meeting. He asked me to tell you he'll return by 2 and to make yourself comfortable. She showed me around briefly, pointing out the kitchen, living areas, and guest rooms, before excusing herself to work in the home office. Feel free to explore, she said. Howard wanted you to. Left alone, I wandered through the vast space, feeling like an anthropologist studying an alien civilization. The penthouse was immaculate but impersonal, more like a luxury hotel suite than a home. The only personal touches were photographs, mostly of company events and professional achievements. There were none of family, none of me. In a hallway leading to what Jessica had called the private wing, I noticed a door with a sophisticated electronic lock. Curious, I continued exploring other rooms. My grandfather's bedroom was Spartan, expensive but utilitarian. The adjacent study, however, captured my attention. Unlike the rest of the penthouse, this room felt lived in. Books filled the shelves, papers covered the desk, and a worn leather chair showed the imprint of regular use. On one wall hung photographs I'd never seen, my father as a young man, looking carefree and determined. In several, he stood alongside Howard at construction sites, shaking hands with business partners, cutting ribbons at new facilities. I was examining these photos when something caught my eye, the corner of a picture frame protruding from behind a shelf. I carefully pulled it out and gasped. It was a photo of me at about age 10, sitting on a park bench with my father, both of us laughing at something off camera. I remembered that day clearly. We'd gone for ice cream, and a bird had stolen my cone. I thought all photos from that day had been lost in the accident. Behind the shelf, I discovered more hidden photos, my parents' wedding, family holidays, even recent pictures of me at my college graduation, taken from a distance. Howard had been keeping tabs on me all along. Moving a stack of books revealed a wall safe partially hidden behind a painting. On impulse, I tried the key Howard had given me. To my surprise, it fit. The safe swung open, revealing stacks of folders and a sealed envelope with my name on it. Hands trembling, I opened the envelope first. Inside was a letter dated just 3 days ago. Allison. If you're reading this, I've either told you the truth or am no longer able to. Inside this safe is evidence of what really happened to your parents. Robert cannot be allowed to continue what he started. I've been a coward for too long. Howard. Heart racing, I pulled out the folders. The first contained newspaper clippings about my parents' accident, along with private investigator reports suggesting brake tampering. The second held financial records showing suspicious transfers from Hayes Enterprises to offshore accounts, all bearing Uncle Robert's signature. The third contained emails between my father and Howard from the weeks before the accident. My father had discovered irregularities in the company books and was gathering evidence against Robert. The final document was a forensic engineer's report dated 6 months after the accident, conclusively stating that the brake lines in my parents' car had been deliberately cut. Paperclipped to it was a note in my grandfather's handwriting: Nathan was right. Robert is responsible. I was so absorbed in these revelations that I didn't hear the elevator chime. A voice made me jump. What the hell are you doing? Uncle Robert stood in the doorway, his face contorted with rage. He looked older than I remembered, his once handsome features hardened by years of what I now recognized as guilt and paranoia. How did you get in here? I demanded, quickly gathering the documents. I'm the CEO while Howard is indisposed. I have access to everything. He stepped closer. Those are private company documents. Hand them over. They're evidence that you killed my parents, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. Robert's expression flickered between shock and calculation. What fantasy has Howard been feeding you? Your father died because he was drunk driving. That's a lie. He never drank and drove. You were a child. You didn't know your father as well as you thought. He reached for the papers. Give me those before you embarrass yourself further. I backed away, clutching the documents to my chest. Stay away from me. You ungrateful little. He lunged forward, grabbing my arm with bruising force. 16 years I put up with Howard's paranoid delusions about that accident. I won't let you restart this nonsense. Let go of my granddaughter, Robert. Howard's voice, though weakened by illness, still carried the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. He stood in the doorway, Jessica beside him. Robert released me immediately, his demeanor shifting to forced casualness. Howard, I was just explaining to Allison that she shouldn't be going through confidential company information. Those files are personal, not company property, Howard said coldly. And I gave her access to that safe. Robert's face darkened. You're making a mistake. She's been gone for years, and suddenly she shows up right when you're vulnerable? Can't you see what's happening? Leave. Now. Howard's tone left no room for argument. Robert straightened his tie, composing himself. This discussion isn't over. He looked at me with undisguised malice. You don't know what you're getting into, Allison. Some doors should stay closed. With that ominous warning, he stalked out. Once the elevator doors closed behind him, Howard sank heavily into his chair. I see you've found what I wanted to show you. I'm sorry you had to learn this way. I held up the documents, my hands shaking. Is this true? Did Uncle Robert kill my parents? Howard's eyes, so like my father's, filled with a sadness beyond tears. Yes, he said. And I've spent 16 years trying to prove it. Howard gestured to the chair across from him. Sit, please. There's much to explain, and as you've seen, we have little time. I sat, still clutching the documents that rewrote my family history. Why didn't you tell me any of this before? Why abandon me to live with the man who murdered my parents? He winced as if I'd struck him. That's the unforgivable part, Allison. My greatest failure. He pressed a button on his desk phone. Jessica, bring us tea and make sure we're not disturbed. After Jessica had brought tea and departed, Howard began his story. Your father was brilliant, not just with technology but with numbers. About 6 months before the accident, he noticed discrepancies in our international division's financial reporting. Small at first, easy to dismiss as accounting errors. But Nathan was methodical. He kept digging. Howard sipped his tea, his hand trembling slightly. He discovered Robert had created an elaborate embezzlement scheme, siphoning millions into offshore accounts. Worse, he found evidence Robert was selling proprietary technology to competitors. Why didn't Dad go to the police immediately? Because of family loyalty, my fault entirely. I raised my sons to believe Hayes' business stayed within Hayes' walls. His expression turned bitter. Nathan agreed to gather ironclad evidence before we took action. He wanted to give his brother one chance to confess and make amends. Howard opened a drawer and removed another file. These are copies of what Nathan found. He came to me 3 days before the accident, said he had everything we needed. We were scheduled to confront Robert together the following Monday. His voice broke. They died on Sunday night. I leafed through the file, complex financial records, email trails, and photographs of Robert meeting with known industrial spies. How did you know it wasn't really an accident? I didn't, at first. I was destroyed by grief, barely functioning. The police investigation ruled it an accident, wet roads, a steep curve. But something Nathan had said kept haunting me. Robert knows I'm onto him. When I finally emerged from my grief months later, I hired private investigators. And they found evidence of tampering? Howard nodded grimly. The brake lines were cut in a way designed to fail gradually, making it look like a mechanical failure rather than sabotage. By then, Robert had consolidated his position in the company. The board supported him, they saw me as a broken old man. But why did you shut me out? Why leave me with them? The question that had haunted me for 16 years. Howard's eyes filled with tears. Fear. Pure cowardice. When I realized what Robert had done, I was terrified he might harm you too if he thought you knew anything. I convinced myself you were safer if I stayed away, that my presence would only put a target on your back. So you left me with my parents' murderer? My voice rose in disbelief. I made arrangements for your care that Robert systematically undermined. The trust fund he claimed didn't exist? I set up $3 million for you. He somehow gained control of it as your guardian. The college fund? Another $2 million. All gone. He shook his head. I underestimated how deeply his hatred ran. Why did he hate my father so much? Jealousy, at first. Nathan was my firstborn, naturally positioned to take over the company. But it became something darker when your father married Jenna. Robert had pursued her himself years earlier. She rejected him, then fell in love with Nathan. Howard looked down. Robert never forgave either of them. You still haven't explained why you never contacted me directly. I did, in my inadequate way. The birthday cards. $100 and no message? That's your idea of contact? It was a signal that I was watching over you, pathetic as that sounds now. He looked ashamed. The truth is, by the time I realized the extent of Robert's betrayal, you were already suffering under his roof. I started building a case against him, believing that was the best way to protect you, remove the threat permanently through legal means. That took 16 years? Robert is exceptionally careful. He destroyed evidence, bought off witnesses. Each time I got close, the evidence would vanish. Howard gestured to the files. Until recently, when his arrogance made him sloppy. This, combined with what your father left behind, is finally enough. So why reach out to me now? Because you're dying? Partly, he admitted. But also because Robert has accelerated his plans. He's arranging a merger that would effectively hide all his past financial crimes. Once that happens, it becomes nearly impossible to trace the embezzlement. He took a deep breath. There's one more thing you need to know. I've changed my will. As of last week, you are my primary heir and will receive controlling interest in Hayes Enterprises. I stared at him in shock. What? I don't know anything about running a company. You're more capable than you realize. You have your father's integrity and your mother's strength. The company needs that now. He leaned forward urgently. Robert doesn't know yet. When he finds out, he'll do everything possible to stop it. Is that why he was here today? He suspects something? Yes. He's been watching me closely since my diagnosis. When he learned I'd visited you, he must have panicked. Howard looked at me intently. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, Allison. But will you help me finish what your father started? Will you help me bring Robert to justice? I thought of my parents, of the life that had been stolen from all of us. Yes, I said firmly. But not for you. For them. Howard nodded, understanding. That's fair. There's one condition to the inheritance: you must promise to use the Hayes resources to do good. Your father always said profit without purpose was meaningless. That sounds like Dad. For the first time, I felt tears forming. I've missed them so much. So have I, Howard whispered. So have I. I returned to my apartment that evening with copies of the key evidence, my mind reeling from all I'd learned. When I reached my floor, I knew immediately something was wrong. My door was slightly ajar, though I distinctly remembered locking it. Cautiously, I pushed it open. The sight that greeted me sent a chill down my spine. My apartment had been thoroughly ransacked, drawers emptied onto the floor, furniture upended, even my mattress slashed open. Most disturbing was my parents' photograph, which had been removed from its frame and pinned to the wall with a kitchen knife. A note was attached. Stay away from family matters. Final warning. I backed out, fumbling for my phone to call the police. Before I could dial, it rang. Howard. Allison, are you home? His voice was urgent. Yes, but someone's broken in and... Don't go inside. Go directly to Jessica's car, she's parked across the street. Robert's men have been following you. I looked down to see a black sedan idling at the curb. How do you know it's her? Silver Audi, license plate HYS 2022. I spotted the car and ran toward it. Jessica leaned over to open the passenger door. Get in quickly, she urged. As we pulled away, I saw two men emerge from the sedan, watching us leave. Howard wants you to stay at the penthouse for now, Jessica explained. It's safer. Robert can't access it without alerting security. But my things, my job. We'll handle everything. Your safety is the priority. Back at the penthouse, Howard was waiting. When I described the break-in, his expression darkened. It's beginning. Robert's getting desperate. The next morning, Howard insisted on holding a family dinner, a strategic move to assess where everyone stood. We need to know if Drew and Caitlin are involved, he explained. I hadn't seen my cousins in years. Drew arrived first, now 30 and working as Hayes Enterprises marketing director. He seemed genuinely shocked to see me, embracing me awkwardly. Allison? God, it's been forever. Are you okay? Dad said you'd had some kind of breakdown. What? He told everyone you called Grandpa with wild accusations because you needed money. That you were unstable. Before I could respond, Caitlin arrived. At 26, she was rail-thin, with dark circles under bloodshot eyes. She barely acknowledged me, immediately pouring herself a large glass of wine with shaking hands. During dinner, Howard carefully guided the conversation toward family history. When he mentioned my father, Robert attempted to change the subject, but Drew unexpectedly spoke up. I always wondered why we never talked about Uncle Nathan. Dad shuts down any mention of him. Robert's fork clattered against his plate. Because there's nothing worth discussing. Your uncle made poor choices. What choices? I challenged. Being a good father? Uncovering financial fraud? Robert's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, Caitlin suddenly burst into tears. I can't do this anymore, she sobbed, reaching into her purse for a prescription bottle. I need my medication. Drew gently took the bottle from her. Caitlin, this is your third refill this month. You said you were cutting back. Give it to me, she snapped. I recognized the medication name, a powerful opioid. The realization hit me, Caitlin was struggling with addiction. Later, when Robert and Veronica were engaged in a heated discussion with Howard in his study, Drew pulled me aside. What's really going on, Allison? Grandpa suddenly changing his will, you appearing after all these years. Dad's been acting paranoid, shredding documents, making strange calls. I studied my cousin, trying to gauge if I could trust him. Drew, what do you know about my parents' accident? His expression shifted. Only what Dad told us, that Uncle Nathan was driving recklessly. He hesitated. Though I always thought it was strange that Dad took over as CEO so quickly afterward. He had me sign some backdated documents when I started working at Hayes. Said it was standard procedure, but it felt wrong. What kind of documents? Financial authorizations, mostly. He said it was to streamline operations, but I've seen enough questionable practices since then to know better. Drew looked troubled. I wanted to say something, but... But what? Dad has leverage over all of us. For me, it's those documents. My signature is on things I never properly reviewed. For Caitlin. He glanced toward the dining room, where Caitlin was now slumped in her chair. He keeps her supplied with prescriptions through a doctor friend. Whenever she tries to get clean, he sabotages it. I was stunned. That's monstrous. That's business, according to him. Drew's voice was bitter. Look, whatever you and Grandpa are planning, be careful. Dad will do anything to protect his position. After dinner, as the family dispersed, Howard collapsed in the elevator. I frantically called an ambulance while Jessica kept Robert away. At the hospital, doctors confirmed Howard had suffered complications from his cancer treatment. They stabilized him, but he remained weakened. Robert immediately used the situation to his advantage, informing hospital staff that as CEO of Hayes Enterprises and Howard's son, all medical decisions went through him. When I tried to visit the next day, security stopped me. I'm sorry, Miss Hayes, but Mr. Robert Hayes has restricted visitation to immediate family only. I am immediate family. I'm his granddaughter. Your name isn't on the approved list, ma'am. I retreated to the penthouse, feeling the walls closing in. Robert was systematically cutting me off from Howard, likely accelerating whatever plans he had before the new will could be executed. That evening, Jessica returned from the hospital with troubling news. They're keeping Howard sedated for his comfort, according to Robert's orders. The doctors are questioning it, but Robert has medical power of attorney. He's keeping him unconscious to prevent him from speaking to anyone, I realized. We need to act now. Jessica nodded grimly. Howard prepared for this possibility. There are contingency plans in place, but we'll need help. I thought of Drew's conflicted expression, of Caitlin's addiction, of the years of manipulation. I think I know where to start. The next morning, I met Jessica in Howard's home office. We need allies, I said. People who know Robert's methods and have access to information we need. Howard trusted very few people, Jessica replied, but he did mention someone who might help us, Michael Bennett, the company's legal counsel. Let's start there. We arranged to meet Bennett for lunch at a quiet restaurant. A distinguished man in his 60s, he listened gravely as we explained the situation. When we finished, he looked troubled. I've suspected irregularities for years, but Robert compartmentalizes information brilliantly. No one sees the complete picture. He frowned. However, I must caution you, I'm not entirely convinced Howard's suspicions about the accident are founded. Grief can distort perception. I slid a folder across the table containing copies of the brake tampering evidence. Bennett reviewed it, his expression darkening. This changes things. But we still need more: financial records showing the full extent of the embezzlement, communications about the technology sales. Can you access those? Not directly. Robert maintains separate legal teams for different divisions. I only see what he wants me to see. Bennett hesitated. There's something else you should know. Howard's new will, I wasn't involved in its creation. He used an outside firm, which is highly irregular. Jessica and I exchanged concerned glances. What does that mean? I asked. It means Robert might be able to challenge it, claiming Howard wasn't of sound mind. Without proper documentation of Howard's intentions, it becomes your word against Robert's. As we left the restaurant, Jessica received an urgent text. Robert's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. He's going to try to push through the merger. We need to move faster, I said. I'm going to contact Drew. I called my cousin, arranging to meet at a coffee shop far from Hayes headquarters. When he arrived, he looked nervous. I don't have much time. Dad's watching everyone closely. I need your help, Drew. We have evidence that your father killed my parents, but we need access to the company servers to get the complete financial trail. Drew went pale. That's not possible. Dad wouldn't. I've seen the evidence, Drew. The brake lines were cut. Dad was gathering proof of Robert's embezzlement right before they died. He sat in stunned silence before finally speaking. I knew something was wrong all these years. The way he talked about Uncle Nathan, the unexplained cash, the offshore accounts I was told never to ask about. He looked up, resolve forming. What do you need? Access to the financial records. And any communications about technology sales to competitors. Drew nodded. I can help with that. And I think Caitlin might help too, in her way. Caitlin? She seemed barely functional. She has her lucid periods. And she's been in every high-level social event with Dad for years. People talk freely around her because they think she's too drugged to remember. But she remembers everything. We developed a plan. Drew would download financial records using his executive access. I would reach out to Caitlin. Meanwhile, Jessica would work with Bennett to document Howard's intentions regarding the will. I found Caitlin at her apartment later that day. Despite her disheveled appearance, her eyes were clear. She hadn't taken her medication yet. Drew told me you'd come, she said, letting me in. Is it true about Uncle Nathan and Aunt Jenna? Yes. We have proof the brake lines were cut. She sank onto her couch. Dad always said terrible things about them. That Uncle Nathan was embezzling, that he was the one selling company secrets. She laughed bitterly. I believed him until I started overhearing his late-night calls, seeing the same patterns myself. Will you help us, Caitlin? She looked at me with unexpected clarity. Dad controls my prescriptions, my apartment, my trust fund. I've wanted out for years but didn't know how. She straightened her shoulders. Tell me what you need. With our alliance forming, we moved quickly. Drew accessed the company servers that night, downloading thousands of financial records. Caitlin provided dates, names, and conversations she'd overheard at parties and dinners. Jessica worked with Bennett to document Howard's mental competence. The breakthrough came when Emily, my college friend now working as an investigative journalist, helped us decode the financial data. These transactions create a clear pattern, she explained, pointing to her computer screen. Money moving from Hayes Enterprises through shell companies to offshore accounts, then partially back through seemingly legitimate consulting fees. Classic embezzlement. Can we trace it to Robert specifically? I asked. Better than that, Emily said, pulling up another document. I cross-referenced the dates with Caitlin's information about Robert's meetings. Every major transfer corresponds with meetings he had with representatives from Nexus Technology, your biggest competitor. The technology sales, I breathed. Exactly. He was selling company secrets and embezzling funds simultaneously. Armed with this evidence, we made one final discovery through Jessica, who had been monitoring Robert's recent communications. He's planning to claim Howard is mentally incompetent, then push through both the merger and a new estate plan naming him sole heir, all at tomorrow's board meeting. Can he do that? I asked Bennett, who had joined our group. Not if we can get Howard's doctor to certify he was competent when he made the new will, Bennett replied. And not if we present evidence of Robert's crimes to the board simultaneously. That night, as we finalized our plans, Jessica received an unexpected call from the hospital. It's Howard. He's awake and asking for you, Allison. The attending physician overrode Robert's sedation orders. I rushed to the hospital, slipping past security with help from a sympathetic nurse. Howard looked frail but alert. Allison, he whispered, taking my hand. Robert? We're ready to confront him tomorrow, I assured him. We have everything we need. Howard squeezed my hand weakly. Be careful. He's more dangerous than ever now. I know. But we're not alone anymore. I told him about Drew, Caitlin, Bennett, and Emily. A faint smile crossed his face. Your father would be proud. He always said you'd be the one to save this family. His expression grew serious. I need to be there tomorrow. Help me. Howard, you're too weak. This ends with me present, he insisted. I started this company. I raised that boy. I need to see this through. Against medical advice but with the doctor's reluctant understanding, arrangements were made for Howard to attend the board meeting. As dawn broke, our unlikely alliance prepared for the confrontation that would either bring justice or destroy us all. The Hayes Enterprises boardroom occupied the entire 42nd floor of the company's downtown headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, a visual reminder of the company's dominance. The massive oak table could seat 30, though today only 15 chairs were filled, board members, executives, and legal representatives, all summoned by Robert's urgent call. I waited with Howard in an adjacent office while Jessica confirmed everyone had arrived. Howard sat in a wheelchair, oxygen tank beside him, but his eyes were alert and determined. Drew and Caitlin were already inside, positioned strategically according to our plan. Bennett and our legal team waited in another room with the complete evidence files. Robert has just started the meeting, Jessica reported, returning from her reconnaissance. He's beginning with a statement about your health condition. Howard nodded. Perfect timing. Jessica wheeled him to the boardroom doors, with me walking beside them. I squeezed Howard's shoulder gently. Ready? For 16 years, he replied. Jessica pushed open the doors. The reaction was immediate, gasps, murmurs, and Robert's voice cutting off mid-sentence. All eyes turned to Howard, then to me, then back to Robert, whose face had drained of color. Howard? Charles Whitman, the board chairman, rose in surprise. We were told you were too ill to attend. A misunderstanding, Howard replied, his voice weak but steady. I wouldn't miss this meeting for the world. Robert recovered quickly, his shock replaced by a practiced smile. Father, this is a pleasant surprise. But you should be resting. We can handle matters here. I'm sure you can, Howard said dryly as Jessica wheeled him to the head of the table. I took the empty seat beside Drew, who gave me a subtle nod. Robert continued smoothly, as I was explaining, recent medical reports indicate my father's condition has unfortunately affected his cognitive function. Dr. Landry has provided documentation. Dr. Landry is your personal physician, not mine, Howard interrupted. My medical team is here to provide accurate information about my condition. He gestured to Jessica, who distributed folders to each board member. Robert's jaw tightened. This is highly irregular. We have an agenda. Yes, we do, Howard agreed. Though perhaps not the one you prepared, Robert. He turned to the board. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but circumstances required it. I have troubling information to share about the company's financial integrity and the proposed merger. Robert slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. Father is clearly not well. His medication is causing paranoia, as Dr. Landry's report indicates. I haven't taken those medications in 3 days, Howard replied calmly. On Dr. Walsh's advice. He nodded to a woman who had entered behind us, his actual physician. I needed a clear mind for today. The boardroom doors opened again as Bennett and his team entered, carrying boxes of documents. Robert's eyes darted between them, me, Drew, and Caitlin, finally registering that we were aligned against him. What is this? He demanded. An ambush? This, I said, standing, is the truth finally coming to light. Over the next hour, we presented our evidence methodically. Bennett outlined the financial crimes, 16 years of systematic embezzlement totaling over $200 million. Drew explained how he'd been manipulated into signing fraudulent documents. Caitlin, surprisingly composed, detailed conversations she'd overheard confirming technology sales to competitors. Throughout the presentation, Robert's demeanor cycled between dismissive laughter, outraged denials, and attempts to discredit each speaker. This is a coordinated attack by a disgruntled family member, he insisted, pointing at me. Allison has manipulated my children and taken advantage of my father's illness to fabricate these accusations. The evidence speaks for itself, Bennett responded, directing board members to specific documents. These financial records show a clear pattern of fraud that began immediately after Nathan Hayes' death. At the mention of my father, Robert's composure cracked slightly. Nathan was a self-righteous fool who didn't understand business realities. He understood that you were stealing from the company, I said. That's why he was gathering evidence against you before he died. Died? Robert laughed harshly. You mean before he drove drunk and killed himself and Jenna? Another Hayes family secret we've kept buried. Howard's voice cut through the tension. Nathan never drank and drove. You know that better than anyone. Oh? And where's your proof after 16 years? Robert's confidence was returning as he addressed the board. This is exactly the kind of baseless accusation I warned you about. My brother's death was a tragedy, but it was an accident, investigated and closed by police. I nodded to Jessica, who distributed the final set of documents, the forensic engineer's report on the brake tampering, along with witness statements we'd recently obtained from a mechanic who had seen Robert at the Hayes estate garage the day before the accident. The police investigation was incomplete, I said quietly. These reports show the brake lines were deliberately cut. As the board members reviewed the new documents, Veronica, who had been silent until now, suddenly stood. This is ridiculous. You can't possibly believe Robert would harm his own brother. Sit down, Veronica, Robert hissed. Instead, she turned on him. You said this meeting was about the merger and Howard's competency. You didn't mention any of this. She gestured wildly at the documents. Because it's all fabricated. Robert snapped. Allison has orchestrated this entire charade. Have I orchestrated the offshore accounts? The technology sales? The witness statements? I challenged. Veronica looked increasingly distressed. Robert, what is she talking about? What offshore accounts? It's nothing, just business arrangements she doesn't understand, Robert insisted. Mrs. Hayes, Bennett interjected gently, are you aware that your signature appears on several of these documents? Veronica paled. What? No, I never signed anything related to offshore, she stopped, realization dawning. The charity board paperwork? For the Hayes Foundation? Bennett nodded grimly. Those weren't charity documents. They were authorizations for fund transfers to accounts in your name. Robert? Veronica turned to her husband, horror spreading across her face. What have you done? Nothing that wasn't necessary for this family's future, Robert insisted. Everything I did for us, for our position, our legacy. Did that include killing Nathan and Jenna? Howard asked quietly. The room fell silent. Robert looked at each face around the table, finding no allies. His children wouldn't meet his eyes. Veronica had backed away from him. The board members watched with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. This is absurd, he said finally, his voice less certain. You have no proof I had anything to do with Nathan's accident. We have the mechanic's statement, I reminded him. And the forensic report. Circumstantial at best. It would never hold up in court. Perhaps not on its own, Howard agreed. But combined with everything else? The embezzlement that began immediately after Nathan's death? The technology sales that Nathan was investigating? The pattern is clear, Robert. Robert stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. This meeting is adjourned. Sit down, Robert, Charles Whitman commanded. This meeting will continue. You can't order me. As chairman of the board, I absolutely can, Whitman replied coldly. And as of this moment, you are suspended from all duties as CEO pending a full investigation. Robert looked around wildly, then focused on Howard. You've wanted this for years, haven't you? To humiliate me, to prove Nathan was the better son? Well, congratulations, father. You've turned everyone against me with your lies and manipulations. No, Robert, Howard said sadly. You did this yourself. Something in Robert snapped. Fine. You want the truth? Nathan was going to ruin everything with his self-righteous crusade. He didn't understand what it takes to succeed in this world. "Robert, stop," Veronica pleaded, suddenly aware of what he was saying. He ignored her. "You always favored him, gave him everything, while I had to fight for every scrap of recognition. When he found those discrepancies, he couldn't wait to run to you, to be the hero again. So you killed him?" Howard's voice was barely a whisper. The room held its breath. Robert looked at his father with a mixture of hatred and defiance. "I protected the company, our family, from his naivety. The car was untraceable. The investigation found nothing. It would have remained that way if you hadn't kept digging." Gasps filled the room. I felt a strange hollowness, vindication without satisfaction. Drew had gone pale, while Caitlin covered her mouth in horror. "You've just confessed to murder, Robert," Bennett said quietly. Robert seemed to suddenly realize what he'd done. He looked around frantically, as if searching for an escape. "I was speaking hypothetically," he backtracked. "This is clearly a setup. This meeting has been recorded as standard procedure," Whitman informed him, gesturing to the ceiling where small cameras were installed. "Your confession is on record." 2 security officers entered the room, followed by 2 police detectives. "Robert Hayes," one detective said. "We'd like you to come with us." "This is outrageous," Robert sputtered as the officers approached. "Veronica, tell them." But Veronica had shrunk back, tears streaming down her face. "You told me it was an accident," she whispered. "All these years, you told me it was an accident." As Robert was being led away, he looked back at me with pure hatred. "You'll regret this. All of you." His gaze shifted to Howard. "Especially you, father." The strain proved too much for Howard. As the doors closed behind Robert, he slumped in his wheelchair, clutching his chest. "Howard!" I cried, rushing to his side as he lost consciousness. The room erupted in chaos as someone called for an ambulance. Through the confusion, I held my grandfather's hand, praying we hadn't won justice only to lose him in the same moment. Howard survived the cardiac episode but remained in intensive care for days afterward. I rarely left his side, keeping vigil in the sterile hospital room as machines monitored his failing body. When he finally regained consciousness, his first words were, "Is it done?" "Yes," I assured him. "Robert and Veronica have both been arrested. The board has voted to cancel the merger and launch a full investigation. Everything's being handled by Bennett and Whitman." A weak smile crossed his face. "And you? How are you holding up?" "I'm processing," I admitted. "It's a lot to take in." Over the following weeks, as Howard's condition stabilized enough for him to return to the penthouse under home hospice care, we spent hours talking, really talking for the first time. He shared stories about my father that I'd never heard, showed me old photographs and videos I thought had been lost, and answered every question I'd carried for 16 years. "Your father was my moral compass," Howard told me one evening as we watched the sunset from his bedroom window. "When I was tempted to cut corners or compromise ethics for profit, Nathan would challenge me. 'What's the point of success if you lose yourself to achieve it?' he'd ask." "He sounds a lot like the man who raised me for 12 years, I said, feeling the familiar ache of his absence. "He would be immensely proud of you, Allison. Standing up to Robert, bringing the truth to light, you have his courage." Howard passed away peacefully 2 months later, having lived just long enough to see Robert and Veronica indicted on multiple charges including embezzlement, fraud, and first-degree murder. Drew and Caitlin were both by his bedside at the end, along with me and Jessica. His last words were for all 3 of us, "Build something better." The reading of the will confirmed what Howard had told me. I inherited controlling interest in Hayes Enterprises, along with the penthouse and the bulk of his personal fortune. Drew and Caitlin received significant shares and assets as well, ensuring their financial independence. Most surprising was a substantial bequest to create the Nathan and Jenna Hayes Foundation, dedicated to ethics in business and support for underprivileged students, a mission that resonated deeply with me. In the months that followed, I worked closely with Bennett and Whitman to restructure the company, returning to its founding principles of innovation and integrity. I maintained my teaching position, unwilling to abandon my students, but took an active role in overseeing the foundation and key company decisions. Drew discovered unexpected talent as the new head of ethical compliance, channeling his guilt into creating industry-leading transparency standards. Caitlin, after completing rehabilitation, became the foundation's outreach director, using her social connections to build support for educational initiatives. Robert's trial was brief but comprehensive. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he accepted a plea deal, life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. Veronica, who cooperated with prosecutors, received a lighter sentence but would still spend years behind bars. I attended the sentencing hearing, finally coming face to face with the man who had destroyed my family. "Do you have anything to say to the victims?" the judge asked Robert. He looked directly at me, his expression unreadable. "I did what I thought was necessary. That's all." No remorse, no acknowledgement of the lives he'd ruined. As he was led away, I felt not the satisfaction I'd expected but a quiet resolution, the closing of a painful chapter. Afterward, I visited my parents' graves for the first time in years, placing fresh flowers and sharing all that had happened. "It's over now," I whispered. Justice took too long, but it finally came. 6 months after Howard's death, I returned to my old apartment building, not to live there, but because I'd purchased it. The renovations were nearly complete, transforming the rundown structure into quality affordable housing specifically for teachers and education workers. My former apartment was the last to be finished. As contractors worked around me, I opened a letter I'd been saving, Howard's final message to me, to be delivered after his death. His familiar handwriting filled the pages with memories, regrets, and hopes for the future. The final paragraph brought tears to my eyes. "Your father once told me, if anything happens to us, Allison will be the one to save this family. He saw in you what I've come to see myself, a strength of character that can't be broken, a moral compass that doesn't waver. The Hayes name has been tarnished by greed and betrayal, but through you, it has a chance at redemption. I don't ask for your forgiveness, my failures don't deserve it, but I thank you for the gift of truth before I departed. You've given me peace I don't deserve, and the company of future it desperately needs. Your parents would be so proud of the woman you've become." "I certainly am." I folded the letter carefully and looked around the apartment that had once represented my isolation from my family. Soon it would become a home for another struggling teacher, part of a community rather than a place of exile. My phone chimed with a message from Drew, "Board meeting in an hour. Caitlin says she'll bring the good coffee." I smiled, thinking of how far we'd all come. The Hayes family would never be what it might have been, those possibilities died with my parents on that mountain road. But from the ashes of that tragedy, something new and meaningful had emerged. Not just justice, but purpose. As I left the apartment, I paused at the door, remembering Howard's question on my birthday so many months ago, "Is the apartment comfortable?" At the time, it had seemed tone-deaf, even cruel. Now I understood it had been his awkward way of acknowledging his failure to provide for me, the beginning of his attempt to make amends. "Yes, Grandpa," I whispered to the empty room. "Everything is finally comfortable now." What would you have done in Allison's position? Would you have forgiven Howard for his years of absence, or would you have held him accountable until the end? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of family revenge and long overdue justice, please like, subscribe, and share with others who appreciate stories of resilience and truth prevailing. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May we all find the strength to face our family secrets with the courage Allison found.